Shalom everyone, and welcome to our last parasha of Sefer Bereshit, Parashat Vayechi. We started Sefer Bereshit, the book of Genesis, with the journey of everyone, Kol HaEnoshut, the entire humanity. And we went through different stages. And now, at the conclusion of Sefer Bereshit, which basically had some kind of a deviation from humanity and focused on Am Yisrael, the beginning, the inception of Am Yisrael. So today, I would like to focus on two children, or should I say, two grandchildren, that has a message for generations to come. The Torah describes the following. Vayar Yisrael et bnei Yosef vayomer mi ele. Yosef took his children Menashe and Ephraim to visit their grandfather, and Yaakov cannot recognize his grandchildren. So Yosef says to his father, Vayomer Yosef el aviv, banayhem, those are my children, asher natan li Elokim bazeh, that God gave me. Vayomar, and Yaakov says to Yosef, Kachem na elai, take them and bring them to me. Va'avarchem, say I can give them a bracha, a blessing. So it's a very interesting description. Yosef brings his children. Yaakov can have nachat from his grandchildren. He doesn't recognize them, which it's a little odd. But then he says, bring them to me and I will give them a blessing. So if you would ask anyone, you would say, okay, so he gave each one of them a blessing, and Menashe is the firstborn, Ephraim is the youngest, so especially based on ancient societies, the firstborn will get the first bracha, Ephraim will get the second bracha, and that's it. But we all know that it didn't work like that. Menashe approaches Yaakov from his right. Ephraim, the youngest, approaches Jacob from his left. And instead of Yaakov putting his hands like that, his right hand on Menashe and his left hand on Ephraim, he does that. Sikel et yadav. He switches hands. Now, before we will go into why would he do that and what does it mean, there is a simple question that we need to ask. Why not just to ask them to change locations? Menashe, if you don't mind, stand on my left. Ephraim, if you don't mind, stand on my right. Why would you do that instead of just telling them, switch? So we will deal with all those questions, and we will also try, and that we will try to do through the shiur, through this class, to also understand why this blessing that Jacob gave Ephraim and Menashe became this eternal blessing that we give to our children every Friday night. Yesimcha Elokim ke Ephraim uke Menashe, that may God place you like Ephraim and Menashe, and then He will bestow upon you all those blessings that we give to our children. What is so special in that blessing? So, the Midrash says, Vayishlach Yisrael et yemino, vayashet al rosh Ephraim vehu hatzayir. So the pasuk says that Yaakov sent his right hand on Ephraim, and hu hatzayir, and he is the youngest. Amar Rabbi Chunya v'chi min hatoladot ein anu yodim shehu hatzayir. We know he is the youngest. When you look at Parashat Miketz, which was 2 weeks ago, when Yosef named his children, you see that Menashe is the firstborn, and Ephraim was born after Menashe. So obviously he is the youngest. So why do I need to know that he is the youngest? Ela mahu hatzair. What does it mean? What is the true meaning of tzair, of the youngest? She'aya matz'ir et asakav. Le'atz'ir is to minimize. Not from the word tsa'ar, pain, but from the word lehatzer, to narrow, which means he would not put all his time in business. He will do, I guess, or I would assume, that he will invest his time also in spiritual matters. Ma zacha, so what was his reward for that? Zacha lebechora. So the Midrash addresses a very interesting question, which basically has another question behind it. Yaakov seems to do the same mistake he did with Yosef. Again, he's going to show favoritism towards one son over the other. He is going to give Ephraim, who is the youngest, a better bracha, or to be the first one to be blessed, or the first one to be mentioned in the bracha, while his brother stands there. Didn't you learn a thing, Yaakov? A. B. What did you see, Yaakov, in Ephraim that made him worthy of the first bracha, or to be mentioned first in the bracha? The Midrash addresses both questions at once. And he says, Yaakov did not play favorites. This is just a reward, the price for Ephraim for what he did. Ephraim worked hard until he met Jacob to invest his time not only in business. I guess it was almost like a family business, Yosef, Menashe, and Ephraim, but he also directed his time to do other spiritual matters and to be engaged with other things. So that is why, this is the reason why he merited, why was he rewarded with the rights of the firstborn. Now, it still does not explain fully what about Menashe? How does he feel standing there, knowing that now for generations to come, even though biologically he's first, spiritually or leadership-wise, he's second? So let's leave that question aside and we will get back to it a little bit later. Rashi gives a different explanation of why Ephraim was basically favored by Jacob. Says Rashi, שראה לגדעון עומד ממנשה, because he saw that the judge Gideon, who was one of the leaders of the Jewish people at the time of the Shoftim, at the time of the judges, he came from Menashe, but אולם אחיו הקטון יגדל, זה יהושע שעמד מאפרים. But Ephraim will be much more, I would say, he would create much more of a powerful leader who was Joshua, Yehoshua. Yehoshua was basically, after Moshe, he was the one to take the Jewish people into the land of Israel. He was not just a judge, he was the leader, and he came from Ephraim, and therefore you give precedent to Ephraim over Menashe. So, unlike the Midrash, Rashi talks about some kind of prophecy. The Midrash spoke about the past, which means Ephraim invested his time not only in business, but also in spiritual manners. For that he was rewarded. According to Rashi, when you looked at Ephraim and Menashe now, at this moment of time, they are equal. They are both the same. The only thing is what? Is the future descendants. Yaakov saw in the prophetic vision that Yehoshua will come from Ephraim for whatever reason, and therefore Ephraim was rewarded to be the first one to be mentioned in the bracha. You see that Chazal, and then later on the commentators, are really bothered by the fact of why would Yaakov do something like that? And in a way, their answers is he had to. According to the Midrash, Ephraim had to be awarded. According to Rashi, he will be rewarded, and therefore Yaakov felt that he needs to do something now to basically mark the idea that Joshua will come from Ephraim. Chizkuni addresses our other question. Shemin hadin היה לו להפוך הבנים. Says Chizkuni, I don't understand. Why do you need to make things so complicated, to switch your hands? Just say, Ephraim, move to the right, Menashe, move to the left. Why do you need to switch your hands? says חזקוני. כלומר, עצם סיכול הידיים מעיד על חוכמתו של יעקב. Meaning, the fact that Yaakov switches hands shows his wisdom. Why? יש לשאול מדוע אם כן לא הפך את מיקומם של מנשה ואפרים. If you really think that Ephraim is the smartest, is the more talented, he is the one that will create Yehoshua, so just tell him to switch. התשובה על כך היא, הוא עשה השכל וחוכמה בידיו, שלא רצה לבייש מנשה, כי הוא היה הבכור, וצריך לחלוק לו כבוד קצת. This is a beautiful, with so much gentleness in this perush. Even when you know that someone deserves something more or better, but the other person is not going to have it, use your wisdom to give Ephraim what he deserves, but don't embarrass Menashe too much. Let Menashe stand at your right, corresponding to Yaakov's right hand and right side. So Menashe still feels that he is important. Then when you switch your hands, he still got their left hand. He understands it, but he's still on your right side. The right side is more important. And therefore what the Chizkuni says, which is so nice, Yaakov learned his lesson. He is not going to buy Ephraim ktonet pasim. He is not going to buy Ephraim a wonderful garment so he can show everyone how much Yaakov loved him. He's going to do something that Ephraim deserves. He's not going to take away something that he deserves, but at the same time, he will not embarrass more than it's quote-unquote needed or will be felt by Menashe. Let's pause here for a second. The story of a firstborn is definitely a theme in Sefer Bereshit. It never really did work, right? You had Cain and Hevel. You had the children of Noach. You had Ishmael and Yitzchak. You had Esav and Yaakov. You had Reuven, Judah, Yosef. Never really worked. Because in our tradition, it's not only about who was born first. It's about who deserves the right for Bechorah, the right for the firstborn. Bechor can just mean, okay, you were born first. Wonderful. Yeah, you have a potential. Reuven had tremendous potential, as we discussed in the Shiurim previously. But you can also lose it. Someone else can gain it because of what he did or because of what his descendants will do. But still, even though it works like that, you still don't want to embarrass Menashe. Sforno says, Rabbi Ovadia Sforno, 16th century from Italy, says, סיכל את ידיו, השכיל והבין במישוש ידיו בלא ראות. Sforno says something very interesting. סיכל את ידיו, we translated it as switching. But סיכל also can mean sechel, cognitive abilities. Yaakov was already, his vision was little blur. He couldn't see well. But he understood just by mishush yadav, just by feeling them, who is Menashe and who is Ephraim. So basically Yaakov, according to Sforno, he didn't do anything, I would say, too out there to embarrass, God forbid, Menashe. But by touching them, he knew exactly who is Ephraim, who is Menashe, and what he should do with them. Which, by the way, just as a side note, and I'm not going to open up this statement that I'm going to say, is that there was someone else who tried to figure out by touching and by feeling who is who. And that was Yitzchak, when Yaakov put Esav's clothing, and then Esav came along. So it's a very interesting thing that Yaakov became an expert, that by touching he can know the identity of the person. So that's Sforno. And then the Netziv. Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin gave a very interesting interpretation to that switching of the hands. He says, Sikel et yadav ki Menashe ha-bechor. The Torah says that Yaakov switched his hands because Menashe was the firstborn, but he got the left hand, and Ephraim, who was the youngest, got the right hand. He says, Umeyutar, it's superfluous. We all know that Menashe is the firstborn. But he says, Aval yesh beze omek v'kavana. There is something very meaningful. There is a tremendous insight in the fact that Yaakov switched his hands, which is what? Ba'asher Menashe ha-bechor. משום הכי היה מכוון שיעמוד מנשה לרגל הימני של יעקב, ואפרים לרגל השמאלי רק את סיכל את ידיו שיהיו להפך. Which means the Netziv says, Yaakov planned this entire event with insight, with meaning. Why? Only the hands were switched, but not the legs, which means he kept Menashe on his right side, he kept Ephraim on his left side. The only thing that was changed was the hands. Why? Says the Netziv, וטעמו של דבר, the reason for that, שאף על גב שהקדים יעקב את אפרים לפני מנשה, even though Yaakov spoke about Ephraim before Menashe, ומשום כך היה במדבר ראש הדגל, and this is also the reason why when the Torah described in the book of Bamidbar, in the book of Numbers, how Shevet Yosef, how the tribe of Yosef encamped, it says Degel Machane Ephraim, the flag of Ephraim, and it says Ephraim before Menashe. However, בפקודים בפרשת פנחס, היה להפך. However, when there is the second counting at the book of Numbers in Parashat Pinchas, Menashe is mentioned before Ephraim. So what does it come to teach you? Says the Netziv, כל זה בא ללמדנו, שלא היה אפרים קודם למנשה, אלא בעניינים רוחניים, מה שלמעלה מהליכות הטבע. אבל בהליכות עולם, היה מנשה קודם וגדול מאפרים. The Netziv is basically creating two tasks. Menashe is the leader and he is the firstborn when it comes to what? To economy, business, farming, all the material things. Ephraim also knows how to do it. But he is more focused on what? He focused more on spiritual things. So when it comes to the hands, Ephraim will get the right hand, the spiritual component. But when it comes to the legs, which basically symbolize, according to the Netziv, halichot ha'olam, the way people walk in nature. So there, Menashe will be the first one. And then he continues, והנה היד משמשת את הראש והדעת. The hand basically stands for what? For the cognitive capabilities and for the knowledge. והרגל משמשת הליכות הגוף לפי טבעו. The רגל, the leg, basically you walk on your legs, you don't think with your legs. The hands are more connected to the dot. We speak with our hands, we don't speak with our legs. ומשום אחי אמרו חז"ל במליצתם, ברא קרא דאבוה, פירוש הרגל טבע אביו, שמהלך עצמו בלי מחשבה ושכל. Because when you want to say that someone walk in your path, he walks. And he doesn't need to think too much, he just basically copy-paste your behavior. משום הכי רצה יעקב אשר מנשה יעקב יעמוד לרגלו הימנית, וסיכל את ידיו להיות אפרים רק לידו הימנית. So there is a tremendous wisdom, according to the Netziv, in what Yaakov did. He didn't want to ask them to switch their place, to switch their positions. He wanted to send a message. Menashe, you are really good at doing stuff in this world. Ephraim, you are really good in also doing things, business and all of it, but more spiritual component. Now let's pause here, because I think there is a tremendous message here. As I mentioned before, all the time in the history of Sefer Bereshit, there was this struggle. Who should be the leader? The firstborn who demanded it for himself because he was so good in everything, at least that's what they thought about themselves. And then they have the others who claimed the rights of the firstborn. But it was always one. At the end of that struggle, you had only one winner. When it comes to Ephraim and Menashe, for the first time in history, you have two children with two different capabilities, two different talents. And Yaakov is able to tell them, you are going to work together. You are good in one thing, you are good at the other thing. You get preference when it comes to the hands, you get preferences when it comes to the legs. You get preferences when it comes to spirituality, you get preference when it comes to physicality and materialism. And there is no contradiction. You can work together. You don't need to fight each other, you don't need to kill each other to win it all. If you want to win it all, you need to come together. And this is the bracha that I will give you for eternity. This is the sikelet yadav. This is the wisdom of Yaakov, which is, by the way, going to tell all his children as well. Before Yaakov dies, he calls all his children and he says to them, and he gives them blessings. To some of them it's criticism, but at the end of the day he says, you are all my children. All of you have talent, all of you have faults, all of you have advantages, all of you have disadvantages. The only way that you can all maximize your potential is when you come together. It's when you all, Bnei Israel. No more one is chosen and the other are rejected. No more expelling others. No more saying to others, you are not welcome. All the children of Israel will be around his bed, and he sent the same message to his grandchildren. You don't need to fight and to kill each other in order to win. Know what are your strengths. Know what is your strength. Know also what is your weakness. And find the strength in the other. When you find the strength in the other, your weaknesses will fade away. The other will find his strength in you, and his or her weakness will turn into a strength. But it's only if you come together. And only if you are willing to accept that, you know what? I will not be the first at everything. But as one, but as together, as a nation, as a family, we will be the chosen ones when we get together. That's the message of the Netziv and his understanding of what Yaakov was trying to convey. In Midrash Tanchuma, little bit of a later Midrash, says the following. ביום השמיני, נשיא לבני מנשה. In the book of Numbers, in Parashat Naso, the Torah describes that each tribe brought a gift to the dedication of the Mishkan, the dedication of the tabernacle. And on the 8th day, the head of the tribe of Menashe brought a gift. So, the Midrash basically takes this pasuk and says the following. I am skipping a bit to the 6th line from the end. And he says, תדע לך, you should know, שהרי יעקב, בשעה שברך מנשה ואפרים, when Yaakov gave a blessing to Menashe and Ephraim, מה כתיב שם? What does it say there? וישם את אפרים לפני מנשה. He put Ephraim before Menashe. עשה הקטן קודם לגדול. He basically gave preference to the צעיר, to the youngest, before the firstborn. וקיים הקדוש ברוך הוא גזירתו. And הקדוש ברוך הוא fulfilled Yaakov's blessing. How? When? אימתי? בקורבנות הנשיאים. שהקריב שבט אפרים תחילה, שנאמר ביום השביעי נשיא לבני אפרים, ואחר כך מנשה, מניין, ממה שקראו בעניין ביום השמיני נשיא לבני מנשה, which means, this Midrash basically says what? Basically says, look, the blessing of Yaakov, that he gave preference to Ephraim before Menashe, was fulfilled when? When the tribes brought gifts to the tabernacle, to the Mishkan. On the 7th day, Ephraim brought a gift, and on the 8th day, Menashe brought a gift. If we take this Midrash and we attach it to the Natziv that we discussed before, we see something very interesting. Bringing gifts to the dedication of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, can be viewed in two ways. It can be viewed as a gift, just a physical gift, which means, it's like a shower. You bring gifts to the house. So the Mishkan, the tabernacle, needs more golden spoons, so each tribe brought some golden spoons. But you can look at that from a spiritual component. Each one of them brought their gifts even though they brought the same gifts, but with different intentions, with different kavanah, different meaning. So, you have one act that has two components to it. So when it comes to spirituality, you send Ephraim first. That's why, on the 7th day, Ephraim was the one to bring the gift. And on the 8th day, Menashe. When it comes to counting how many people they have in the tribe in order to get ready to the conquer of the land of Israel, Menashe is the first. So it's exactly like what the Natziv suggested. So now we know a few things. We know why Yaakov felt that Ephraim needs to be first. It might be because he did something in the past, or because his future descendant, Yehoshua. We also understand that Yaakov didn't want, God forbid, to insult Menashe, so he tried his best to minimize the embarrassment. And then we also saw that basically Ephraim and Menashe becoming that prototype of brothers who don't hate each other. I know it sounds noble, because all the brothers in Tanakh until now didn't really like each other. Cain and Hevel, even Noah's siblings, Ishmael and Yitzchak, Esav and Yaakov, Joseph and his brothers, no one really got along. And here you have Menashe and Ephraim, and they both can understand they can be different, they can differ from each other, but they know that they are working for one mission. So now, we might understand the following pasuk. Vayevarchem bayom ha'u le'emor. So Yaakov says the following. He gave them a blessing on that day, he says, saying, le'emor, b'cha yevarech Yisrael le'emor. From now on, when someone belongs to Am Yisrael will say a blessing, he will say what? Yesimcha Elokim. May God place you, or will make you, like Ephraim and Menashe. Ephraim vechi Menashe. Ephraim is the youngest, Menashe is the oldest. Vayasem et Ephraim lifnei Menashe. And from now on, we will all know Ephraim is before Menashe. Think about it. From now until eternity, Menashe is basically agreeing to be second in spiritual matters or in any other matters. B'intayim, for now we think Ephraim is the first one. And Menashe is willing to accept it because he understands there is a task and they can accomplish it only together. Says Rabbeinu Bachya, B'cha yevarech Yisrael, LeYosef yedaber. What does it mean, B'cha yevarech Yisrael? He will say to Yosef, Ki bezaracha yevarech Am Yisrael v'yomar lamidbarech. with your descendants, you, Yosef, you are going to be the example, meaning your descendants are going to be this model of a bracha. Saying that to Yosef. Yosef, who was not the cause, but he was definitely part of the reasons of all the animosity between the brothers, he taught his children how not to be him and his brothers. ישמחה אלוקים כאפרים וכמנשה, וישם את אפרים לפני מנשה, שהקדימו למנשה בכל ברכותיו, ואף על פי שהיה צעיר עשה כן, לפי שראה מעלתו גדולה, על הבכור וכן פרשו המפרשים. So he basically says at the beginning, like all the other מפרשים says, that basically he saw that Ephraim was more elevated than Menashe, so that's why. But he says, ויתכן לפרש לפני מנשה לפניו ממש. ואין הכוונה למעלת אפרים להיותו קודם לו, אלא למעלת מנשה האח הגדול. This is a brilliant interpretation. You know why Ephraim was able to be elevated? Because Menashe was willing to give it up. Menashe recognized that Ephraim is a better leader than him, and therefore, לפני מנשה, it's because ויפלו לפניו ארצה. Menashe basically says, put Ephraim before me. He deserves it, not me. I mean, when you think about it, it's unbelievable. Because he says, והכוונה בזה ליעקב ללמדו מוסר ודרך ארץ, ושינהוג כבוד במנשה אחיו הגדול, כאדם שהוא מסיב את חברו בפני הגדול ממנו, להיות משועבד לו, ונמשך אחר עצתו. Which means Menashe is a beautiful neshama, is a beautiful soul. He sees that Ephraim is better than him, and he's allowing him to be the leader. He's allowing him to be first. But Ephraim, you will not have it without Menashe. ולפי שהיה עתיד אפרים הצעיר להיות לו יתרון ומעלה על הבכור, and because Ephraim is going to grow and is going to be better than Menashe, הוצרח הזקן לשומו עתה לפני מנשה להזהירו על כבודו. So he basically took Ephraim in front of Menashe, not לפני, which means before, like okay, Ephraim is first, Menashe is second, but no. According to Rabbeinu Bachye, Menashe stands here, Yaakov brings Ephraim and says, look, Ephraim, you are going to be better than Menashe, but don't ever lose sight of two things. Menashe agree with it, and B, always treat him with kavod. Don't, שלא יתגאה עליו למעלתו הגדולה. Don't become arrogant because you were chosen. You need to know, you were chosen because of your merit, but the fact that I can choose you is because of Menashe. He is allowing it. This is an original and brilliant interpretation to what was going on there. Basically, Yaakov sees that educational moment for generations. And think about it. Let's think about our own children. Some children can have more talent. Some children can have different talent. Some children can have talent that you need now, and some children have talent that you need maybe later. Whenever someone gets some kind of preference, they need to know that they do it with quote-unquote the permission of the other sibling, and never lose sight of it, so they will never become arrogant. If we stop here for just a second, there is another set of brothers that the youngest was much greater than the oldest, and the oldest was very happy with it. Moshe and Aharon. Moshe was chosen to be the leader of the Jewish people. Moshe was chosen to receive the Torah and to give it to the Jewish people. When Moshe spoke to God and God tried to convince Moshe to be the leader, and Moshe said, no, no, no. At the end of the conversation, he says, Shlach na biyat tishlach. Please send the person that you always send, which is Aaron. Take him. I don't know how to speak. I'm not eloquent. Take Aaron. And Hashem was very upset with Moshe. And he says to him, V'ra'acha v'samach belibo. Moshe, are you concerned that Aaron will be upset that he was not chosen? Exactly the opposite. When he will hear that his youngest brother was chosen to be the leader, he will be happy in his heart. And that's exactly what the Torah describes. When Aaron met Moshe, he was happy that Moshe was the leader. And because of that, he became the Kohen Gadol. This is a different story. However, when you look at Sefer Shemot, it will be interchangeable. Sometimes it says Moshe ve'Aaron, sometimes it says Aaron ve'Moshe. Because each one of them was good at whatever they were good at. But not everyone can be the winner. There is only going to be one leader, not two. And therefore, Moshe was chosen, Aaron accepted it, and not only accepted it, he was happy for Moshe. He was happy that Moshe was chosen. It all began with Ephraim and Menashe, according to Rabbeinu Bachya, which I think it gives us an incredible insight in who is Ephraim and who is Menashe, and also a little bit about Yosef. And what do I mean by that? If you go back to Parashat Vayechi, the Torah describes this handsome young boy, talented, creative, visionary. His brothers are basically shepherding the flock, and he is talking about farming. He is in a totally different era of economy. He's being sold as a slave, and he pulls himself up. He becomes the second in command in Egypt. There is no question that he felt chosen. But at the beginning, in his youth, what was his dream? His dream was, everyone is submitting themselves to me. They are all going to bow down to me. It's all about me. They are just pawns on the chess board. That's it. They are not really used for me. I am the one. And basically was oblivious to the strength that all the other brothers had. But Yosef realized, you can't do it alone. You might be very talented. You might be the man for the task. But you know what? There are going to be other times that there are other people who are going to rise up to the occasion and will do what is right. Yosef realized it. Yosef realized it and taught his children, we are doing it together. And even if you are the chosen one, it doesn't mean that you now become oblivious to your siblings. It's exactly the opposite. Now it's up to you to find the talent in each one of them and to make it grow and to respect them for who they are. This is such a wonderful, beautiful, united message that it goes against everything we saw in Sefer Bereshit. Everything we saw in Sefer Bereshit until Vayechi was always this struggle, always this animosity. Who is going to win? And now with Ephraim and Menashe, we have a blessing for eternity, for generations. You don't need to win. You need to unite the people. And to know, שאין לך אדם שאין לו שעה ואין לך אדם שאין לו מקום. There is always going to be someone who can save the day. And look at our Tanakh. Sometimes we have Samson from the tribe of Dan. Sometimes we have Gideon from the tribe of Menashe. Sometimes we have Barak from Naphtali. And they all saved the day. When Judah was not around, when Yosef was not around, when Ephraim is not around, when Menashe is not around. The idea of Am Yisrael is that when they come together. Says Rab Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, ביום ההוא נאמרה בפעם הראשונה, on that day, for the first time, הברכה אשר השתמרה עד היום הזה, על שפתותיהם של כל ההורים היהודיים, כשהם מברכים את בניהם. This sense of blessing, this experience, this meaning of that bracha that Yaakov told Yosef, that will be for generations to come, that when we give a bracha to our children, we mention Ephraim and Menashe, מכאן באה ההכרזה המרגשת והמודגשת, ויברכם ביום ההוא לאמור. That Yaakov that gave that blessing on that day לאמור, to say for generations to come. בך יברך. בניך יתברכו במידה כה מרובה, עד כאשר ירצו האבות בישראל לברך את בניהם, הם יראו אותה כברכה הנעלה ביותר, ישמחה אלוקים כאפרים וכמנשה. It's interesting. We don't give a blessing to our children, ישמחה אלוקים כאברהם, יצחק ויעקב. May Hashem bless you like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We do say it to the daughters, כשרה, רבקה, רחל ולאה, not כאפרים וכמנשה. But when it comes to the boys, we tell them, our bracha to you is not like to be like the forefathers, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Because they already created what they created. Now we are talking about the children. Avram was the one who started, who planted the seed for the family. Yitzchak was willing to give his life for that family. Yaakov expanded that family and planted the seed for the nation. Now the nation is you and me. How do you build a nation? How do you maximize the potential of every individual? How do you create this harmony of opinions, harmony of thoughts, of characters, of nature? Ephraim and Menashe. This is the secret of the Jewish people. When both people understand their strength and their weaknesses, when they have mutual respect, when they see the main goal, when they see the task that it's upon them, when they see the responsibility that they have for each other, this is the time when they come together, Becha Yevarech Israel. For generations to come, we will give a bracha to our children. It doesn't matter who goes first. We are all within it together. So we conclude Sefer Bereshit with the idea of togetherness. As humanity began with harmony and went through a storm, really, of despair, separation, you have Abraham who begins his journey to bring things together, and Am Israel who begins his own chapter at the end of Vayechi, and seems to be that will go down in the beginning of Sefer Shmot. Always remember the bracha, Becha Yevarech Israel. This is the bracha of hope and life that we all have. Yesimcha Elokim. May God bless you, Ephraim ukemenashe. May God bless you, Ephraim ukemenashe. Like these two children who understood what does it mean to walk together? What does it mean to be respectful to each other? What does it mean not to be hostile to each other, but rather to see the beauty in each other and to create Am Israel. Thank you.